Welcome to Cyber Threat Intel, your go-to source for the latest updates, news, and insights on cyber threats. Our goal is to arm you with the knowledge to protect yourself in the digital age, whether you're a cybersecurity professional or just curious about the threats lurking in the digital shadows. Make sure to subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast listening platform to join us on the front lines of cybersecurity, because in the world of cyber threats, knowledge is power. Welcome. This is Cyber Threat Intel. I'm your host, John Good. This is episode number 64. And it's Wednesday, July 10th, 2024. If this is the first time you're joining the show, glad to have you here. If you're coming back from another episode or some other content, glad to see you coming back and getting your fix of cyber threat intel. So with that being said, if you need to grab a snack or a drink to get you through the content, make sure you run and go do that real quick before you keep going. And then also, if you want to see any of the articles that we cover in the episodes, or we add other articles that are worth reading that we just don't have time to cover, all that can be found on cyberthreatintel.com. Again, cyberthreatintel.com, and you can find all that information about the show on there. With that being said, let's go ahead and hop on over to my screen and hop into the content. So, first article here, Blast Radius attack exposes critical flaw in 30-year-old Radius protocol. Security vendor InkBridge Networks on Tuesday called urgent attention to the discovery of a 30-year-old design flaw in the Radius protocol and warned that advanced attackers can launch exploits to authenticate anyone to a local network, bypassing any multi-factor authentication or MFA protections. The company published a technical description of what is being called the Blast Radius attack and warned that corporate networks such as internal enterprise networks, Internet service providers, ISPs, and telecommunication companies, telcos, are exposed to major risk. So if you don't know what Radius is, you definitely should know what Radius is in this career field. It's an important protocol for authentication. And certainly this is a serious issue if you can bypass multi-factor authentication. We've talked about several different circumstances or situations where multi-factor authentication has been a factor, or the lack thereof. Multi-factor authentication has been a factor because people or companies have not had their users enrolled in multi-factor authentication or required it. And when that is not enabled, it is a significantly lower barrier for attackers to be able to breach your systems. And one of the things too that we see is that there are protocols out there that have been around for a while. And certainly, just like anything, any kind of software application or hardware, anything really, the longer that it's out in the marketplace, the more likely it is that there's going to be some vulnerabilities or something that is discovered for that, flaws in that system, because new technologies and new methods and everything like that comes out. So we see that a lot of times, just again, with anything that's been out for a long time. That's why we see a lot of things that get retired, like operating systems. We see, for instance, Microsoft Windows XP is no longer out there, or should not be out there any longer. We see new versions of that. We see new versions of software. We see all these things. And a lot of times these protocols aren't always the same as far as updating and how they are maintained. Now, the vulnerability here is being tracked as CVE 2024-3596 and VU number 456537. There's a quote here, excuse me, that says the root cause of the attack is that in the Radius protocol, some access request packets are not authenticated and lack integrity checks. An attacker can modify these packets in a way which allows them to control who gets on the network, the research team explained. So again, Radius is all about authentication and that whole process. And it's a serious issue when that core protocol is impacted or has flaws, because that can affect your entire infrastructure, your entire network. Another quote here, it says the key to the attack is that in many cases, access request packets have no authentication or integrity checks. An attacker can then perform a chosen prefix attack, which allows modifying the access request in order to replace a valid response with one chosen by the attacker. Even though the response is authenticated and integrity checked, The chosen prefix vulnerability allows the attacker to modify the response packet almost at will, according to the Inkbridge network's documentation. At absolute minimum, Inkbridge Networks recommends that every single Radius server worldwide must be upgraded to address this vulnerability. It's not sufficient to upgrade only Radius clients, as doing so will allow the network to remain vulnerable because this is a server-based vulnerability. It also says that it can take a significant amount of cloud computing power to succeed in performing the attack. So this is another thing that you have to consider with any vulnerability, any flaw, not just this one in particular, but what is the kind of barrier to entry or the barrier to use of a vulnerability or of an exploit? We see this a lot with things like 0 days or things that take immense amount of computing resources or just resources in general or technical acumen, technical skill. What is that level or that barrier to be able to do it? The lower the barrier, the easier it is for people to do it, threat actors to do it, and the more likely you are to see it. The higher that barrier is, obviously the more difficult or the more resources that you need, all those things matter, and that's going to limit who is likely to carry out an attack. Things like these super sophisticated 0 days or really sophisticated vulnerabilities and attacks that require a lot of resources, a lot of times you will see that those are typically only going to be carried out by things like nation states. So that certainly limits who's going to come after you. And if you're not really on the target list for those kinds of organizations, those entities, then you probably don't have to be as concerned. You might not have to do as many things. You might not have to invest as much to defend against those specific tasks or those specific risks. Keep in mind, in cybersecurity, it's all risk-based decisions. Everything is based on risk, what we do, how we defend it, what we are putting in as far as controls and technologies and all that stuff. And if the likelihood is fairly low, then that's not really that high of a risk because it's not that likely to happen. So those are all important decisions that you have to make. And if you're already in cybersecurity, you most likely know that. If you are trying to get into cybersecurity, that's the kind of mindset that you need to have is what is the risk and do I need to actually make a decision here to do something? What's the cost of that decision? You have to balance all of that stuff. Pretty common risk management 101, but certainly core to how we operate in cybersecurity environments. Next article, hacktivists released 2 gigabytes of Heritage Foundation data. An established cybercrime group with a track record of attacking political targets posted on Tuesday roughly 2 gigabytes of data from the Heritage Foundation, a prominent conservative think tank based in Washington, D.C. SiegeSec said it released the data in response to Heritage Foundation's Project 2025 set of proposals that aim to give Donald Trump a set of ready-made policies to implement if he wins this fall's election. The data that they stole was created between 2007 and November 2022. The data includes the full names, email addresses, passwords, and usernames of people associating with Heritage, VO said, including users with U.S. government email addresses. This itself can have an impact on Heritage's reputation, they added, and it'll especially push away users in positions of power. One of the things that we see sometimes with these special interest groups is that the people that are involved don't always want to have it publicized that they are involved in these certain groups or these certain initiatives, because depending on what those groups are focused on or what they want to achieve, it might not be the best light to be sitting under as far as your professional or even personal reputation. Even though you may believe certain things, you may not want that known to the world that you support that or that you believe that, or that you want that to happen. And especially in the political world, these different political figures, that becomes even more of an important thing because no matter which side of the aisle that you're on, and in the United States, we have a few different major prominent groups that run our government. But regardless of the side that you're on, you could support one thing that could be maybe within your beliefs, but counter to what your constituents or the people that vote you into office, what they believe. And that could call into question what your motives are, what your decision-making patterns might be, what you might vote for versus what you might not vote for. And so, that's why it's a big deal. It says the attack marks the second suffered by Heritage this year. So, that's a key point here with any attack, really, is that once you identify that you've faced an incident, that is why it's so important that you do recovery and response and learn lessons and fix things. Because once you get attacked once, you're most likely going to get attacked again. We see that all the time with these attacks, especially ransomware attacks and some of those more high-profile attacks, because they're going to retest you. They're going to see, did you fix whatever the issue was? Did you actually identify what the issue was? Or did you just say you fixed it or kind of just brush it off? So we see that all the time with companies that get hacked, is they get this kind of second wave. And if you're not ready for it, well, then that's going to look really bad on you because you didn't do anything to adjust. Next article, Chinese threat group APT40 exploits in-day vulns at rapid pace. APT40, a Chinese state-sponsored actor, is targeting newly discovered software vulnerabilities with the goal of exploiting them within hours, according to a joint government advisory. Rather than using techniques that require user interaction, the group seemingly prefers to exploit vulnerable public-facing infrastructure and prioritizes obtaining valid credentials. It often hops on public exploits as soon as they become available, setting up a patching race condition for organizations. Meaning that it's always a race. Whenever there's a vulnerability that's released or announced, it's always this race as far as the good guys versus the bad guys, how fast you're able to patch that vulnerability or that issue versus how fast the threat actors or the hackers can exploit that vulnerability in your infrastructure or in your environment. So that's kind of that race, right? That patching race. The quote here says, the focus on public-facing infrastructure is interesting. It shows that they're looking for the path of least resistance, which is always common with attackers. That's no different. They're always looking for the easiest way in. It says, why bother with elaborate phishing campaigns when you can just hit expose vulnerabilities directly, says Tao Mandel Barr, product manager at Do Control. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that because this quote makes it seem like, hey, phishing campaigns are super sophisticated and they're crazy and whatever. Now, certainly they do require some infrastructure and some things that are to be set up in order to carry out those campaigns. And when people click links to either call back to some server with a shell or with those credentials, storing those, exfiltrating that data, all those kinds of things. So in that sense, I don't disagree with it, but it does kind of like lean towards, hey, this is crazy. This takes all these resources and is crazy extensive. I mean, it's still low-hanging fruit to go after users, but the main thing is, especially with phishing campaigns, is you do have to bypass the filters and firewalls and everything like that might be in place in order to get the emails and everything through. So, there's pros and cons of both for sure from an attacking perspective. But absolutely, if they can just find some vulnerability in your public-facing infrastructure, they don't even have to go through all that hassle of setting up all the infrastructure for those phishing campaigns. So, easy or not, it's just going directly to the source and finding essentially the front door open. I think that's a good comparison. It's like, why run around the house and try to find a window that's open or that's unlocked when you can just walk through the front door? Makes sense, right? Quote says in the article, because this group regularly exploits vulnerable end-of-life or no longer maintained devices, including vulnerabilities from as early as 2017, it's imperative that organizations regularly update their software and apply patches as soon as vulnerabilities are made public. Devices that are no longer maintained or cannot be patched quickly should be taken offline. This is Cybersecurity 101, IT 101 really. If you're not using devices, they are obsolete, they are legacy, they are no longer in use and serve a purpose, get those things out of there. Stop leaving those on your network. That's why the asset inventory is so important, because you need to know what's on your network. You need to know what you have, because if you're not maintaining those, especially, then those can be easy points of entry for attackers. As far as patching, I mean, a patch is released, get the patch applied. That's not all that, I was going to say that's not all that difficult. It can be difficult to apply patches. So I don't want to downplay that, but the idea of just patch management and getting patches deployed and making sure things are updated, that is such a critical and foundational thing that you have to do. These are not super sophisticated things. Patch, 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 and remove your old assets. Do it. I just don't understand why companies sometimes fail so badly on this aspect with such a critical and foundational thing. It's crazy. APT-40 regularly conducts reconnaissance against networks of interest, including networks in the authoring agency's countries, looking for opportunities to compromise its targets, according to the Joint Advisory. The group then deploys web shells for persistence and focuses on exfiltrating information from sensitive repositories. Pretty standard stuff. Attackers always try to get web shells or some kind of persistence enabled so that if they get kicked off or they need to come back, they have that essentially that door still open for them to get in. The data stolen by APT-40 serves dual purposes. It's used for state espionage and subsequently transferred to Chinese companies. Chris Groves, Director of Cybersecurity Strategy at Nozomi Networks, wrote in an emailed statement to Dark Reading. So by transferring the data to Chinese companies, they can certainly leverage that and try to create competing products or advance their own technologies, because, for instance, if they were to steal some secret algorithm or IP code that they weren't sure of how to create, or they just didn't know how to create it, that could give them that information. That also gives them the ability to analyze and create competing services or software or products, because now they know exactly what you're doing or what certain companies are doing, and they can just create something that is better or that offers other things that you don't. So pretty standard stuff that we do see a lot of times with especially with China. So, and tech and products and all those kinds of things. Next article, Fujitsu confirms customer data exposed in March cyber attack. Fujitsu confirms the information related to some individuals and customers' business has been compromised during the data breach detected earlier this year. Japanese tech giant states that the attack did not involve ransomware, but relied on a sophisticated mechanism to evade detection while exfiltrating data. In a statement today, the company says that it has concluded the investigation into the incident and confirms that data was stolen by malware that pivoted from a single point of compromise to 49 computers. This malware is not ransomware, but employs sophisticated techniques to disguise itself, making detection difficult. It was determined to be a highly advanced attack, according to Fujitsu. The company says the commands to copy files were executed due to behavior on the malware. For this reason, Fujitsu notes that there is the possibility for the data to have been exfiltrated. But it sounds like they don't know. And so that's certainly concerning. Fujitsu adds that it has not received any reports that the compromised data has been misused. So I find that interesting. They're saying the data most likely was exfiltrated or may have been exfiltrated, but there's no reports that saying that it has been misused. I guess, I don't know if that includes being sold. If an attacker had taken the data and then put it on the dark web for sale, that's kind of unclear as far as what that process is. But they're certainly ruling out the idea of this being malware or ransomware rather. But also here's another point too about this whole pivoting idea. A lot of times that's what happens. That's a typical attack chain where one system is going to get compromised, whether that is an attacker themselves or if they uploaded malware, whatever it is. The idea is to pivot to as many systems as possible or to critical systems that are reachable at that point. So some level of pivoting is always going to happen. It's very rare that the first system that is compromised is going to be the actual one that they want or that they were trying to get to. And so we certainly see that happen. With malware itself, the idea is to infect ultimately as many systems as possible if you can, because that just gives more persistence, more ability to go around the network. Obviously, if you could compromise an entire network versus a single system, that is going to be better from an attacker's perspective. But it all comes down to their objectives and what they're trying to do. Obviously, all threat actors and attack groups, they have differing interests, differing objectives. So it can vary. Sometimes you'll see an attacker that doesn't have an interest in compromising hundreds of computers or the entire network or anything like that. And that's just because it's not their objective. So next article, US disrupts AI-powered bot farm pushing Russian propaganda on X. Almost 1,000 Twitter accounts controlled by a large bot farm pushing Russian propaganda and domains used to register the bots were taken down in a joint international law enforcement operation led by the U.S. Justice Department. Organized and managed by a deputy editor-in-chief at Russian state-run news organization, Russia Today, RT, and a Russian FSB officer, the bots disseminated disinformation targeting Twitter users, or X users, worldwide since 2022 using an AI-enabled software named Meliorator. I'm not sure if that's how you say it, but RT affiliates used this software to create authentic-looking social media accounts posing as real people from multiple countries worldwide to amplify false narratives and Russian malign foreign influence on Twitter. I think that's pretty standard practice with Russia and RT. We've seen that quite a bit. As early as 2022, RT had access to the software and AI-enabled bot farm generation and management software to disseminate disinformation to and about a number of countries, including the United States, Poland, Germany, the Netherlands, Spain, Ukraine, and Israel, the FBI said. So they go ahead and give a picture here kind of the process. Bot farm registered new Twitter bots using private email servers at the domain there on the screen, or the domains on the screen, which were seized by an affidavit as part of the DOJ-led operation. X also took down 986 social media profiles, identified as being part of the RT's bot farm, often claiming to belong to individuals in the United States. Today's actions represent a first in disrupting a Russian-sponsored generative AI-enhanced social media bot farm, said FBI Director Christopher Wray on Tuesday. So this is the thing with social media. We're seeing this a lot more, and especially governments are getting pretty good at creating a lot of this stuff. And that's why you see a lot of these social media giants or social media platforms testifying before Congress, for instance, in the United States, because we have to figure out some way to really combat this stuff. It's very difficult when you allow anybody to create accounts and do things on your platform and then also regulate it in that sense. It's like, where's the line and the barriers to entry? Because if you create a paid platform, then it is more difficult for any attacker to get on there. Because if you're having to pay, let's say, even $10 a pop or $10 per account, per month, that is going to create a barrier, not only for the threat actors, but also for the people that want to legitimately use the platform. And that might not be in your best interest as the platform. So it's kind of this trade-off of what you're trying to do. And then the government is wanting more regulation. They want more filtering and the ability to identify some of this bad traffic, as it were. So that'll be an interesting thing going into the future, especially as they use more AI, because obviously AI is a big topic right now, a hot topic right now. And if we start seeing governments use it more and more, especially in this sense as a threat actor, then we're just going to see more and more of it. We're going to have to figure it out how to combat that. So with that being said, that's the last article for today's episode. Again, this is Cyber Threat Intel. This is episode 64, and it is Wednesday, July 10th, 2024. I'm your host, John Good. If you want to see all the articles that we covered, as well as some other articles, head on over to cyberthreatintel.com. Again, cyberthreatintel.com. You'll be able to find all that information on there. And with that being said, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for today, and I'll see you in the next one. See you later. Are you tired of overpaying for cybersecurity training? Are you interested in training from industry professionals? Are you looking for cybersecurity career services? If you answered yes to any of those questions, then cybertrainingpro.com is the perfect platform for you. At Cyber Training Pro, we're a one-stop shop for all your cybersecurity needs. We can train you for industry certifications or just improve your overall knowledge and skills in a certain area. Unlike other platforms, we don't stop there. We can also coach you throughout your career, practice your interview skills, or create a high-performing resume with our career services. CybertrainingPro.com isn't just another training platform. Students get exclusive access to our private community, where we go beyond training courses to provide additional content, tips and tricks, and engagement with both other students and staff. Look, by the year 2025, there could be as many as 3.5 million job openings in cybersecurity. With so much opportunity, why not maximize your career potential with a platform that cares about your success? Come join us at cybertrainingpro.com and start building your future today.